This video is all about the Atari 2600 and our favorite co-op games on the system. Visually, these games are incredibly dated, but when it comes to the gameplay and with the right partner, they can still be really fun today.
Here are our top 10 co-op Atari 2600 games. Number 10, Atlantis. Atlantis is a fixed shooter that can be played by two players. The right joystick will fire the right cannon, and the left joystick will fire the left cannon. In this mode, the center cannon does not fire. Cannons on both sides cannot move or aim at all. You're required to time your shots in the positions that they are placed.
So as you can tell, gameplay is very limited. It's a shame. This game looks great for the console. It's more detailed and colorful than most other games that came out at this time. It would have been much more enjoyable if you were able to move the cannons. That being said, if you get your timing down, you can still have a good time with a partner. Number 9, Rampage. If you don't know Rampage, it was originally an arcade game where you play as giant monsters: George the gorilla, Liz the lizard, and Ralph the wolf. The goal is to destroy all of the buildings. Once the stage is clear, you move to the next. The graphics clearly took a big hit in the 2600 port, but it still plays like Rampage. This is a late release on the console, so that makes it a bit less impressive, especially when you can play the NES or the Master System or 7800 ports instead.
That being said, there isn't anything else like this on the console, so that alone makes it worth a try. I just really have a fascination with ports of newer games on outdated hardware. At least this version has Ralph in it. Still don't know why the NES excluded that guy. Number 8, Mario Bros. Before Super Mario Bros. And the NES, there was the original Mario Bros., and it was ported to just about every console and home computer of the 80s. It's so weird seeing Mario on anything outside of a Nintendo console, but these were different times.
If you never played the original arcade version, maybe you played it on Mario Bros. 3. Anyways, as expected, the 2600 port is pretty stripped down, and quite ugly, but it still feels like Mario Bros., more or less. This one can be a lot of fun, depending on your partner. You can also choose to sabotage the friend you're playing with, if you're an asshole. If that's you, stop watching this video now. We're all about cooperative gaming here. Number 7, Entombed. Entombed is a basic concept. Your little stick figure guy moves through the mazes towards the bottom of the screen. If you run into a monster, you die. If you take the wrong path, you'll get stuck in the maze, and then you'll die. However, you are able to pick up little rectangles that allow you to break walls when you get stuck.
At first glance, the two-player mode didn't seem like it was co-op at all. There isn't much teamwork involved. That being said, you do have the same goal, which is to get to the end. As long as one gets to the end, you both move forward. If you and your friends save up your rectangle wall breakers, you can work together by preventing your partner from getting stuck. The mazes in the game are procedurally generated, so they are different every time. This wasn't supposed to be possible in the 2600 hardware, but somehow the designers used some sort of coding wizardry to accomplish this. Apparently this game's code is still being studied today. Number 6, Space Invaders. By today's standards, Space Invaders might not look like much, but in 1978, it was something no one had ever seen before. It's a very important game in history. It practically invented the shoot-'em-up game genre. The Atari 2600 port came out in 1980 and was the first arcade-to-home console license. It might be a simplified version of the arcade port, but the core gameplay remains intact.
However, one addition the 2600 port has over the arcade is the ability to play two players simultaneously. Of course, there are now countless Space Invader ports, remasters, and different versions that have been released over the years, but in 1980, this was a big deal. As simple as it is, the gameplay can still provide endless fun as you try to beat the high score. Number 5, Worm War 1. Worm War 1 is a game that was actually designed for the 2600. You control tanks that are in a fixed location on the bottom of the screen and shoot down the worms as they scroll towards you. There's a lot of color and movement. The further you get, the faster the scrolling becomes.
Things will quickly get pretty chaotic. It's impressive that the 2600 can handle everything going on here. There's a lot of fixed shooters on the console. Worm War 1 is lesser known, and maybe the best the 2600 has to offer. Number 4. Joust. Everyone knows Joust. It's one of the most popular early arcade games. You have one button that you repeatedly tap to keep your bird in the air. The faster you flap, the higher you go. As you slow down, the bird will descend. It's a really simple concept, but it can take some time to master the flying. The goal is to eliminate the other bird and collect their eggs? I'm not sure what that is, but it gives you points.
Playing this with a friend can be a double-edged sword. If you work well together, then you can take care of the enemies faster. But if you're not in sync, it's easy to accidentally kill each other. So communication is essential. Again, the 2600 port is pretty stripped down visually, but the gameplay is all there. It's just a really addicting game that holds up really well. Number 3, Dark Chambers. Dark Chambers is a dungeon crawler similar to Gauntlet or Dandy. With a friend, you travel across 26 levels, collecting treasure and fighting various creatures along the way. The goal of each level is to find the exit door. There are a number of items you can pick up, such as keys to open doors, potions to heal, poison that drains your health, and guns that increase your fire rate. Unlike most 2600 games, Dark Chambers isn't just about high scores. There is an actual ending to the game. This is kind of a rarity for the console, and I think it helps the game hold up.
Launching in 1989, Dark Chambers is a late release for the console. Despite the simplistic look of the game, it still plays and feels like a real dungeon crawler. It goes to show strong gameplay mechanics are what's most important. Even with the hardware limitations and basic visuals, Dark Chambers still manages to tell its story. As long as the core gameplay is enjoyable, nothing else matters. That's why retro video games are so popular right now. Good game design is timeless. There was also a version of Dark Chambers on 7800, which is arguably better. But the core game is about the same. Number 2. Wizard of War. Wizard of War is a port of an arcade game. Think Pac-Man, but with guns. The player's characters are called warriors, but it's spelled W-O-R-R-I-O-R-S for some reason. Player 1 is yellow and on the right. Player 2 is blue and on the left. You're able to team up with a friend and run around the mazes to shoot down the different enemies.
Once the screen is cleared, you move on to the next. Like most games of the era, it's all about the high score. A good strategy is to stand back to back so you're able to attack in two directions, but try not to get too close because you can shoot each other. Like most 2600 games, Wizard of War is simple, with minimalist visuals and gameplay. Within seconds of starting, anyone can figure out what to do in the game. Aiming for a higher score with each attempt creates an addicting experience that makes you want to try just one more time. Number 1, G.I. Joe, Cobra Strike. The game came out in 1983. Other than the name G.I. Joe, Cobra Strike has very little to do with the G.I. Joe franchise. The game plays similarly to other 2600 games of the time, such as Breakout, Kaboom, Pong, and maybe even Space Invaders. But what sets this game apart from other Breakout-inspired games is the fact that you can play it cooperatively using two paddle controllers. However, instead of bouncing a ball with the paddles, your goal is to protect the running men below by blocking the missiles being dropped by the giant Cobra.
On top of blocking the attacks, you are able to shoot the Cobra with missiles from the cannons on both sides. But in order to do so, you need to first move your paddle over to your cannon and then press the fire button. Once your men are all destroyed, the game ends. As mentioned before, this is a true co-op game. Unlike other 2600 games that feature co-op, this one doesn't have a competitive aspect to it as well. The score is shared between players, and working together is required to move forward.
The giant Cobra must be hit around 8 times in order to move to the next level. You will then be presented with an almost identical Cobra, but with different colors. The graphics are simple, However, the giant cobra sprite is very impressive for the 2600 hardware. This is one of the few instances where a character in a 2600 game actually looks like the source material. Another interesting feature in the game is when you plug a joystick in, a third player can join in and control the cobra. This might not sound like much, but for the time, I think this was a pretty unique gameplay element.
Overall, G.I. Joe Cobra Strike is a simple game. It may not be the best 2600 game, and by today's standards it may seem outdated, but if you're looking for a unique co-op experience on the 2600, this is certainly a lesser known classic that deserves some time. This is the definition of easy to play, hard to master. There aren't a lot of co-op games for the 2600, but this is definitely one of my favorites.
So that's our top 10 co-op 2600 games.
Let us know what your favorite is in the comments. Thanks for watching.
Smash that motherfucking like button, you little toad. Bebop, stop, pop, sweat, shotgun, rock, bar, dop, flop, chop, slop. Co-op.